Hey, this is Carlo of 4GQ TV. I have a very special guest today. Very honored to interview you. You have a book series coming out. The first two are out. Tim Beard, former Marine, but once a Marine, always a Marine, they say,
Right.
and CIA clandestine officer, which is a very honorable title to work for the people in the United States government as well. So, very excited to talk to you, Tim.
Thanks so much for having me on today. I appreciate the opportunity.
Tim, so I was looking through your books, and volume one is kind of like physical awareness, security, and things that you should be aware of in your surroundings. And I'll just
Right.
start off with a brief story. My mom, we were traveling to New York City recently, and we were in a Uber, and my mom says, "Hey, did you turn the stove off?" I said, "Yes." And then she said, inadvertently, without realizing it, she said in front of the Uber driver, she says, "Okay, because we're not going to be back home for like 3 or 4 days, and we might get snowed in New York City."
Yeah.
And I was thinking, okay, I need to give my mom a look at this book, look twice, because that's kind of like, situational awareness. We don't know this Uber driver. We don't know if his past. We don't even know if his real driver's license is on that Uber or if somebody, used something else to him the job. But it made me a little paranoid for a moment, thinking, okay, now this guy knows my mom's elderly. She's not going to be home for a couple of days.
Mhm.
What if he breaks in? What if somebody breaks in? Or what if he tells somebody inadvertently that might be part of something? You never know. You just never know. So, Tim, can you talk a little bit about your book and how you go into this
Sure.
kind of detail?
And let me mention on that one too, the first thing that comes to my mind isn't necessarily him. It's who are his friends. Most everyone has friends. Who are their friends? You have no idea. You'll never know. But he now has a tip and he can pass that along. And that distances from that. So basically the book series, there's three books. The first and the second one are out right now. You go to timbeardauthor.com, timbeard, Beard, author.com, and that links to my Amazon Author Central page. You can see all three books. The first two are available in print, audio, and ebook, and the third one is for ebook pre-order. It'll come out in the other versions on the 10th of March. But the first book, Look Twice, Your Guide to Staying Safe in an Unsafe World, what I tried to do is I tried to take the lessons that I learned over my career, dating back to 1990, when I was first commissioned as an officer in the Marines. I tried to take all those lessons and without a lot of technical jargon, I tried to put something together to help what I'll term mom and pop America. Just regular, normal, everyday people who want to go home and eat dinner with their families. This isn't about left or right politics because security isn't. It's about staying safe and taking care of those you love. And so I looked through and I said, well, what did I do when I was a clandestine service officer in the Central Intelligence Agency? How did I do my work? And how do my colleagues do it? By mitigating risk, by being aware and being in the moment. Most people aren't from the SEAL teams. They're not going to close with and destroy the enemy through fire and maneuver. That's not what they do. Most people are trying to mitigate risk, and to use terms I use, simple ones: avoid, 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 because it's really important. Live under the radar, be the gray man. I describe those terms in something I call the look twice mindset, about the first 30 pages of volume one. And then I apply that to material over the next 15 chapters over all three books. Everything from safe tech to your home, your workplace, travel, there's civil unrest, getting your family out of, or your loved ones out of harm's way. Where do you go? I talk about all those different things through that perspective.
So something that will resonate with our audience for sure is that we have a lot of people that listen to us or read our website or, social media, and they're cosplayers. They go to conventions or they go to
Mhm.
music festivals, and they have, this really big community. And a lot of times, more often than not, and I'm going to be honest here, sometimes I see like groups of cosplayers and they're walking together and I'm like, okay, that's good. At least they're together. There's a group of people.
Sure.
But every so often you see like one or two straggling like way behind. And a lot of these convention centers are in, they're built up areas. There's some industrial alleys in some ways, some go into some, but sometimes you're walking through like areas you might be staying at a mediocre hotel, let's say like a 2 star or 3 star because it's cheaper, but the areas you're walking through are not as visibly safe. Like there's areas where you might be walking past a dumpster or behind the building, so it's not physically safe,
Mhm.
and you see some of these people walking by themselves. So, do you have any tips that our audience could relate to in this scenario?
First thing you got to do with awareness, you got to be in the moment. So, and people are going to sit there and shake their head and go, I hear this all the time. First thing you got to do, your phone, you need to put your phone away until you're in a safe place. If your face is buried in your phone, you have just given up your awareness. Somebody come right up next to you. Same thing with headphones, with earbuds. You got to take them off, take them out until you get to a safe place. If you need to use your phone, pop into a coffee shop, go into a grocery store, go into something what I'll call a hard point. A hard point is a place where you are off the street, physically separated from an adversary. That's somebody who may potentially wish to do you harm. Could be a criminal or not, but an adversary, they don't have your best interest at heart. Get away from where they can come at you easily, where there's other people around, then use your phone. If you get into trouble, run into a place like that, and then you can call for help and stay on your phone and listen to the dispatcher. You need to establish what I call a baseline, and that's challenging when you're in a new place. When you're back home, for a baseline, that's what's normal and what's not. So you want to have a baseline around your home, where you work, where you go to school, where you shop. If you go to a house of worship, a strip mall, a shopping center, you want to know what is normal and what's not there. How do people dress? How do they interact? Is it normal to see groups of 10 young guys who look bored wandering around, or is that trouble brewing? If something starts to deviate from your baseline, it warrants further investigation. If it's strange, it's time to go right now. So if you're at a place like a convention center or a conference somewhere, you probably don't have a real good baseline. But the local adversaries, the local criminals, they do, because they're going to spot you immediately that you're not from there. If you go to New York City, who are the people who are walking down the street looking up at the skyscrapers? We call those tourists because people who live there, they've seen the buildings. They're going home, they're going someplace, they're not looking up. So somebody that wants to do something to you potentially, they're looking for people staring at their phones, staring up at the buildings by themselves. We'll call it the sheep who's separated from the flock. You don't want to be that person. Safety in numbers, stay together. If something looks weird, time to go now.
So let's say the situation is unavoidable and they have to walk through an alleyway. Do you have tips maybe of what kind of how do I say this? Security that they might carry on them, or a quick way to get out of danger, let's say?
Sure. When you go into a situation that's difficult, you always need to know what you, first off, as I said, be in the moment, be aware. Make sure you have your full senses. You can see, you can hear. One thing you can use, and I'm going to escalate this a little bit, security whistle. There are security whistles now. You can find them on Amazon. They are super loud. They're made of they're $20. They're made of titanium, and they will attract attention because they are loud. It's not a weapon, but it is something that will draw attention. Scream, yell, run to the light. We call this getting off the X. The X is the place where something bad's going to happen. You know, if your audience has seen war movies, that's the ambush spot. That's the kill zone where, you know, in the war movies. That's where a criminal has likely prepared something to happen. Either the streetlights are they're not very effective there, or the streetlights are out. Clue: if all the streetlights are out in an area, That would be a clue. That's something that's probably not real normal. It may be a prepared area. There may be no CCTV cameras there. It may be shielded from observation. People from a busy thoroughfare or the street where there's people walking around use the example of an alley. They can't see into that. How long is that alley? Are you able to run? Some people can't. They may be disabled. They may have a knee injury. They may have whatever reason they can't run based on their age. Um, so you need to know what your capabilities are and the capabilities of others who are with you, because you're only as quick as the slowest person with your chain. So if you go into a situation like that, look to see, where am I going to go if something does happen? If at all costs you can avoid it, go the long way to avoid it. Take the extra time. If you're moving down the street and you're nervous about the next 3 blocks, get an Uber to take you to where you're going. It's better to pay a few bucks and get dropped off right in front than to walk those 3 blocks and never get there. It comes down to planning and preparation. That's really what's going to keep folks safe, by mitigating the risk in advance. So those are some tips. But if you're going to walk into an alley and there's only one way forward and one way back, you have just limited your options and you may be cornering yourself, especially if somebody appears on both sides because it's their turf.
I think that's a very good point. A lot of times when people go to events, they're unfamiliar, they're tourists, and they don't really look out the whole scenario.
Right.
You also mentioned in one of your books about, getting a map and becoming familiar with the area. You could do that on Google Maps too. I think, pull it up and become familiar with the area. But I highly suggest that for anybody going to any conventions, music festivals, always know what's around. And in your book, you mentioned some other important stuff like knowing where your local police station is, knowing where the fire station is, knowing where your local convenience store, grocery stores are. Those are spots that I agree with you 100% on. Like, if you feel like you're in danger, and you're close to one of those, go to those. There's people around. You're less likely to become a victim in that situation with others around you.
Know where you can seek medical care. A lot of folks don't realize it till it's too late. There are some places you can call 911 and they're going to be there in 45 to 60 seconds, perhaps. Probably not an ambulance, but you're going to at least have a law enforcement officer. Some places, it may take 5 or 10 minutes. If you just got stabbed and you're bleeding out, you may have 30 seconds. So that's where you have, and I cover in there, I have a brief chapter about about getting medical training in advance, having some first aid training, knowing what to do, because when something happens, you're the instant person on the spot. You got to take care of that situation to the best of your ability until somebody with more advanced training comes to help. And it's a whole nother thing. Like if I'm in Metro Miami, if you're in Florida and you have a hurricane, you may lose phone service. That's a whole nother thing I cover in the books, because if that's a reality you face, well, you got to be prepared for it. But for most folks in 2026, that's not necessarily what they're going to face. So knowing where you're going to go if something happens, as you mentioned, like Google Maps, go to the street view, see where, and look at an overhead map. I have a whole section in one of the books about book 2, volume 2, about learning a new city. So you're going to go to a cosplay event. You figure out where it is. Where are you staying? Are you staying in a hotel? Is it nearby? Have a couple routes on how you can go that are around other people. Look at you can call the local police and ask what the crime profile is in the area there. You can do searches online. Know where you're going to eat. You may be eating in your hotel. You may want to go out to a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant, go with friends. Again, that whole concept. Think of moving a sheep. Don't be the sheep that gets separated from the flock, because then you're exposing yourself to a whole bunch more risk. If somebody's staying behind, then have people wait with them. Move as a group. That's key. Know where you're going, keep your head up, move deliberately, move with confidence. They're going to know you're not from there because of the way you dress, because of the way you move. But at least you're doing you're becoming a harder target. Soft targets become victims. A harder target is somebody who has taken little steps to reducing their threat profile. They're reducing their attack surface. That's the word, the phrase. And by reducing the attack surface, the adversaries oftentimes will move on to somebody who's less prepared.
Another thing I want to bring up is because you talk about perpetrators and opportunity. And it's not to say that everybody that maybe goes to a convention that is a photographer that hangs out in the lobby is a perpetrator or anybody bad. But all too often, and more often than not, especially in California, I have seen where photographers are in the lobby and they're hounding the cos. Oops, sorry, my my auto zoom went in there. All right, come on, auto zoom, come back out. This is a blooper moment. Technology, when it spies
As
on
I
you,
said in the
probably.
book, it'll fail you at the moment of truth. So don't rely too
Yes.
heavily on it.
So when I see cosplayers go to conventions, I see them hounded by photographers in the lobby, and a lot of them are not press or media. They just have like standard 3-day badges or 1-day badges. And there's a couple times where I have actually seen photographers tell the girls in cosplay, "Hey, bend this way so I can get a photo. I like this view." And one time, I'm not going to call it the convention or anything, but I spotted what the photographer was looking at, and I immediately used my press badge and intervened. And I said, "Hey, excuse me, I'm here as press. I'd like to get a photo real quick." The guy was trying to get a photo of underneath the girl,
Sure.
and the girl didn't realize it because the way the costume was, and I felt horrible for the girl. But this is another place where people that go to conventions are vulnerable because there's so many photographers that hound them that just want photo after photo after photo, and sometimes I see them exhausted and they're like, okay, well, I got to go meet my friends, and the photographer's like, oh, one more, can I get one more? And they do it in such a way where they make the cosplayer feel almost obligated to take the
Guilty.
photo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would like your opinion and advice to cosplayers that have faced situations like that, where maybe the photographer is making them feel guilty to take more photos. Maybe the photographer is trying to get angles on the girl, and maybe the girl doesn't realize it. Like, how can they be aware of all this stuff?
First thing I do, a term I'll use, the possible versus the probable. So this comes to threats like you just described there. You got to look at your environment and say what is possible and what is probable. You can't worry about everything that's possible. I could have a meteor fall on me right now and crush me. Is that possible? Sure. If I'm worried about that as a security threat, I'm going to be nervous. I'm going to be fatigued. I'm going to use up my limited resources. I got to worry about the 5 or 6 things that are probable threats. If if somebody, a young lady, is wearing a somewhat revealing cosplay outfit, perhaps with a very short skirt, that is a potential threat because the internet lives forever. And so she's got to be concerned that somebody maybe doesn't have good intentions. It is a it is a probable threat that somebody's going to try to work that angle because there's a lot of people out there who are freaky. So understand that, and that's got to be something that she's defending against the whole time. When it comes time to do what I'll call break contact, you have to be firm. You have to look at the person, and it varies by culture, but in the United States, you look them directly in the eye. You can say things, you can say the darndest things with a smile, but you got to smile. You got to be friendly. Just look at them and say, thank you for taking the photos. I appreciate your time. I have another commitment or I have an appointment to get to. I need to leave. Thank you so much. Smile, be friendly, but be persistent and leave. And you go your own route. You walk your own route. You are not responsive to them. You have given them something. If they continue to want to take, you cut it off firmly, looking them in the eye, having an excuse that you prepared. Usually an appointment has something, or I have another commitment. Thank you for your time. I very much appreciate it. And then you break contact and you leave. And if you have other folks around, they can assist in that too, because if they start to see that you're uncomfortable, They can say, hey, remember, you have another thing coming up. We need to go. And then if the person persists, they can intervene and say, excuse me, and please, thank you, sir, ma'am, those work. Excuse me, sir. She said she has another commitment. Thank you for your time. Gotta go now. And you leave. And if that doesn't work, then maybe it's ramping up to where you may need to have somebody from security come help, and that person probably won't be there very long.
Very good points. I think that's very important. I can't wait till the community listens to that because it will probably help out so many people that are anxious when they go and don't know how to break contact and they feel guilty about breaking contact.
Don't
You
be
mentioned
anxious and don't be guilty. I mean, you are essentially, when they're taking a picture of you, you're a product. You are a product and you are being kind and they're helping by taking pictures, but it's a two-way street, but that street ends at some point.
great advice. Now, you talk about security, technology in your second book. And I think, again, that comes into our audience, whether you're music festivals, whether you're comic book conventions, cosplay, wherever you could be in the world where there's a lot of people. You mentioned something briefly about RFID in there. You mentioned proximity technology. And in very crowded conventions, the opportunity presents itself more often than in a public space like a grocery store for somebody with malicious intentions to try and gather data. So how can people protect their technological data at conventions? There's also, keep in mind, there's conventions sometimes offer free Wi-Fi, and there's a lot of people on that. So you mentioned VPNs. I'd like
Mhm.
you to talk about that as well. So combine all that, and what would you think?
I'll start off with the most extreme example. This is for somebody that has a heightened security profile. There's something, this will not work for a lot of your audience, but I'm going to mention this to start. There's something called a Faraday bag. Folks may or may not be aware of. You can put your phone in a Faraday bag. I have a picture of a small one and a large one in the books. You can put your phone in a Faraday bag and it eliminates it from receiving a signal. Basically, it becomes worthless. If you put it in a small bag and you put the small bag, say for a size for a phone, and then you take that smaller bag and you put it in a larger bag designed for a tablet, still has a pretty small form factor. But I'll guarantee you no signal gets through that. But if you need your phone, you open the bag, you pull your phone out, and boom, there you go. You're right on. That's for a more extreme profile. You can have your phone ready very quickly. You can have it with you, but no one is able to do anything with your phone. Something a lot of folks don't think about when you're in that kind of a setting. Turn off your Bluetooth. Turn off automatic connection of Wi-Fi. You need to select if you want to join something. Consider public Wi-Fi to be compromised. One way you can use that, I would not use public Wi-Fi in any setting unless I was doing something to protect myself. Virtual private network, a VPN. There's a lot of VPN companies out there. Some of them are based in the United States. There's one big one that's well known, based in Switzerland. There are ones based around the world. I encourage folks to get a paid account because you're going to get faster servers. But what it does is it produces an encrypted tunnel that all your data goes through. So it protects you from folks being able to do an attack. I cover that in volume 2, as you mentioned, in what chapter or part that I call safe tech. So if you use a VPN, that is a good thing that you're able to do. In your hotel, you can use a travel router. I don't really cover that in the book. That's a little bit more advanced beyond just for regular folks. But if somebody wants to research, you can set up a travel router where it's essentially a firewall that you use in a hotel room and you connect all your devices to your travel router. It's a very small form factor, about like this big around, this thick. Fantastic. $120, something like that. But if they use a VPN, be wary of public Wi-Fi, turn off your Bluetooth. Um, be careful of folks tapping things. Hey, can I tap something on your phone? You can share a QR code. Most QR codes aren't going to be a problem. Some could be. Everything you're doing, what I'm trying to help folks to understand, it's about mitigating risk. What are the probable threats you might face in a specific environment? Identify those by planning ahead, by thinking ahead, and then try to mitigate each of those threats. How am I going to solve this one? I'm going to turn my Bluetooth off. How am I going to solve this one? I'm going to use a VPN. I have a paid VPN account, and that encrypted channel, the encrypted tunnel, my data is going to flow through it to a server that's provided for me by my VPN provider. And I'm confident in them, and it's going to dump it out. It's basically like the equivalent of trying to identify water drops coming out of a fire hose. Ain't going to happen. And you're using AES 256 encryption, advanced encryption standard 256. So, I mean, it's something where the data is going to be secure in that channel. Those are a couple things. Be wary. A lot of folks, when you travel and go to these environments, a lot of good people there. Some aren't. And you can't always tell because there are some snakes who are smiling, well dressed, handsome or beautiful, male or female, and they're going to want to take advantage of you for their purposes. They're an adversary. And don't forget, they're out there.
Yeah, something you mentioned real quick I want to touch on is the travel router. So recently, I have a friend that works in technology and he uses a travel router constantly.
Smart
He
man.
recomm he recommends it because but he does buy the fancy pre-built ones that have all the stuff in there. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to go out and buy the same one he had because he had he got the top of the line that you could get. So I went out and I bought a cheap MediaTek uh, cheap router, like $50, but I put open WRT on it. So then I could modify it and put my ad guard on there. I put my tail scale, which is at zero WireGuard VPN. And then on top of that, I'm going to add another VPN that will do all the outbound traffic and inbound traffic. It just won't touch the tail scale
Sure.
network. So for people listening to this, definitely look into travel routers and study. And there's lots of videos out there with people explaining it from tech to
Mm-hmm.
security, and they serve a great purpose. You can put them in your pocket. You can have them connect to the public Wi-Fi, and they will kind of like sanitize it and route your traffic a certain way that you set it up to do. So I want
Yeah,
to
and,
bring that
and
up.
on the travel router as well. One thing that I do is in the firmware on the travel router, it's not that hard to do. It does take a little bit of homework, but not too bad. I've installed multiple servers into the firmware that I can switch via software. Every signal that leaves that travel router has to go through that firmware VPN. It's the VPN being put into the firmware. So there are no signals escaping. You can use a very, very long, if you use a password manager, or you can use a passphrase, something you can remember, like I live in a home near the beach with gray walls and it's very tall. And then you have, at the end, a few dollar signs, ampersand, exclamation point, and a bunch of numbers. So, it's something you can remember. Whereas a strong password, say use a 20 or 30 character strong password, unless you're some super genius, even them may fail on this. It's very difficult for a human to remember, which is why I recommend using a password manager, again, AES 256 encrypted, to keep your passwords and all of your logins in. Different one for every single thing you use. Never, ever, ever, ever reuse a password, ever. Every single one, you'll have hundreds. It's okay. It's in your password manager. You don't have to remember them. You cut and paste them over. But if you have a 20 or 30 character password in your travel router, that is basically going to be a firewall that's going to protect you, especially in a hotel where someone may have on a hotel-based or public Wi-Fi system. You can use it in a coffee shop. You just can't carry it around. You can't use it on the move. You can carry it to the coffee shop, set it up on your table, requires an external power source generally. But then once you've logged in with that into the coffee shop router, all your other devices connect by Wi-Fi into your travel router behind a firewall. So as you said, it's fantastic. A lot of people just aren't aware of those, but that is protection. That's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And they could run, and some of them could run on portable PD power banks too. So for all you
Most.
guys going to conventions and music festivals, they're great. Like put in a power bank with PD output, at least like
Yep.
3.0, and it should work just fine.
Travel
Um,
routers aren't covered in my volume two. I didn't cover that. I do cover VPNs. I cover a whole bunch of stuff. I'll call it some theory. It's your data. How are you going to protect your data? Because it's as much as you have a car, it's your data, just like you have a car or just like you have a computer. It's your data. People are like, well, I don't feel right encrypting it. Why not? It's your data. You're just securing it.
Absolutely. And data is important because data is now the product basically for every company out there, every advertiser, and potential adversaries. I mean, your data is what everybody's after. Your
It's worth money.
information, it's worth, yeah, unfortunately, it's worth money, especially on the black market. It's a terrible thing that we've gotten to this part in society. In the old days, I used to joke that we had a phone book and you used to pay them to keep your information out of the phone book.
Right.
Now you're paying companies to be seen more on their version of a phone book, like social media. You're paying for your check marks, you're paying
Yeah.
for your boost. It's like, how did we go from 1986 ways of thinking of, oh, we don't want our information out there, to, oh, I want everybody to know what's happening right now. Like it's such a weird way that these technology has forced us to become like this.
We before we started this, you and I were chatting a little bit. I told you a quick anecdote. I wanted to mention. I went to Georgia Tech for the first couple years of my undergrad, and I was buying a computer before I headed Georgia Tech, and this is back in 1985, 86 timeframe. I got an AT&T PC 6300. Your audience can look those up and say, "Wow, that's an old computer." But when I bought the thing, it was pretty cutting edge at the time. And I remember the salesman said, this hard drive, it's 20 megabyte. And here's the quote. He goes, this thing's a canyon. It's a canyon. You will never be able to fill this. Was it now 3, 4 pictures? Because back then, when software was written, it was maybe 64K. It was nothing. I mean, that was a massive, massive hard drive. AT&T, I had something I did with them when I was in high school. They had a 300 megabyte hard drive, and this was up in the New York, New Jersey area, northern Jersey. That was one of the largest hard drives in the whole region, 300 megabyte from a major, major company. They had huge platters. So my point on that for your audience is that what is technology today? Where are we going to be in not just 5 years? Where are we going to be in 25 years? 25 years ago, very few people had a cell phone, a mobile device. Tablets weren't on. I mean, everything's changed. People can say, I know that. But think about that when your data is floating out there and somebody wants to be an adversary and use your data against you. What they can do now is going to be very different in 10 years. That's not that far away. 10 years is not a long time in the big scheme of things.
Wow, and this whole data thing right now is kind of like a big topic, and I would love to briefly touch on these topics. AI, we type in
Mhm.
AI prompts every day now. Where do you in search engines, they translate it to their AI engines, and it goes through AI, and inadvertently, everyday people, we're training the AI models. I mean, it's
Mhm.
part of the terms of service that most probably don't even look at, but it's there. We train those models. It takes our data. Sometimes it'll tell us, hey, don't say this is too sensitive. Try to reword it. Don't put in your API tokens to websites and whatnot. And other times it just takes that data. Like there's some that say, hey, put in your medical data and we'll figure out what your problem is. We'll let you know what to talk to the doctor about. Great idea. But from a security standpoint, that's frightening.
Right. And, some of your audience may like reading science fiction. If you go back into science fiction, Fahrenheit 454, is it 454? The one from back in 1957, thereabouts. Some of the other things that have been Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Some of those things that they write about a long time ago, that stuff becomes reality at some point. We've talked about, the movie The Terminator, what, 1984, thereabout, and you talk about the rise of the machines. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. I'm not trying to say, hey, this is where things are going. All I'm saying is that stuff that's written about, it tends to evolve over time because there's smart folks who write some of that science fiction. And whether it's 5 years or 25 years or 50 years, some of those things enter the mainstream. Terms of service. How many members of your audience read every terms of service agreement? How many understand really what it says unless they're an attorney? So the problem you've got, most people just click on it. So what is a good term of service agreement right now may not be in 6 months. It may not be in a year because things change over time. Expectations for what is okay and what's not okay certainly changes over time. Anybody who's 50 or older knows exactly what I'm talking about because stuff that used to be totally acceptable maybe stopped being acceptable over a period of just a couple short years. And the culture and society and the laws now reflect a very different reality. This all pertains to your data. It pertains to AI. Just because a point I make in the book, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because you can use this new cool piece of technology doesn't mean it's going to be good for you over the long term. You may want to think twice, look twice, think twice. There's a reason that in volume 2, part 1 is safe technology, and part 2 I call fraud because those two go together. Technology, fraud is often the technology provides an avenue for an adversary to commit fraud, identity theft, steal your data, etc., against you. There's a reason those two parts are right next to each other in volume 2.
One thing that probably pertains to your book and maybe what government officials have done throughout their whole lives in earlyhood is that I've noticed if I ever, when I try to research myself, I come up with multiple like pseudomins and stuff. And it's because whenever I put data in a website, I don't always put my full name for the email, to get the email account or whatever. I'll put like a middle name or I'll make up a middle name as the last name. So a lot of times when I get data on myself, it's so confused and it confuses me with multiple people. So I'm happy I did that. And I think that a lot of people out there should be wary when they put in their full information to companies. I guess if you trust the company, like your ISP, you have to do it. But if it's a free service you're signing up for, I don't always recommend putting in your full information or not
Um,
even your date of birth. Make up something that's not true that you
Close.
could close. You can remember. And would that be something that like a government official would do if they had to create an email account or
I would say it's something I would do. If it's amazing how many people were born on the 1st of January of a memorable year because they're just putting, people can remember, I use my date of birth when I fill out forms online. I always put 1 January of the year. It's easy to remember. Have something, maybe, have um, something that you tend to use as a profile that's not your personal real data, but is a facsimile of your data. So it's, you use, as you said, you could use your first initial middle name or just your middle name. You can use a slightly altered date of birth. You could do some things like that. That goes back to the question I asked before. Just because you can, does that mean you should? I don't tend to fill out surveys online because my data is worth something. My data is worth money. Somebody is going to spend time. I have from the car dealership. I got email recently. 5th warning. First off, it's not a warning. It's from the car dealership. You have no control over my life. If I am inclined to open that and I see they're in there, they want to have me fill out a survey. You really want me to fill out a survey when you're sending me 5 follow-up emails? That's crazy talk. So that tells me something also. Why are they going to waste the time to send me 5 emails to have a survey? One, they're not getting a survey from me. Two, what's in it for me? Why am I going to post a survey? If somebody gives me truly exceptional service, and say I'm buying a new computer, talking to Dell or something like that, and I spend an hour and a half with a guy, he's doing really good stuff for me, It's probably an internal survey in the company. I'm going to help the guy out. I'm going to fill out a survey because, hey, thanks for the good service. But I'm not going to fill it out when I buy something at the local sporting goods store and I had a transaction that lasted 30 seconds and they were looking out the window the whole time. I'm not going to freely fill in forms. Some people love filling in forms or they don't feel their days complete until they filled in every blank. Please don't do that. If there's a star for something that must be filled in, like if you sign up for a free movie streaming service, there's a couple of them out there. You oftentimes don't have to give your name. You just have to give an email. And I mean, that may be it. You may have to give a state you live in. Don't tell somebody where you live because it's going to end up in a database that's going to get sold and it's going to end up several different places. You have lost control. It is your data. And I'm specifically speaking here in your audience to folks who are in their teens, 18, 20 years old, starting their life. One, avoid paper. Do everything electronically if you can, but have your data backed up in a place where your data is safe, perhaps in Ireland, someplace overseas, end-to-end encrypted, where you control the keys. Back your data up. Don't have a lot of paper. If you have a fire or a theft, you're going to be glad you have your data someplace off-site. Plus, you can live in a smaller place. You don't have to have 20 file cabinets for all the papers that your uncle who's a boomer has. He's got all these file cabinets. Scan it in, shred it. Don't throw it away. Shred it, and then have it backed up. Have an external hard drive, 2 terabyte. They're cheap. Put it in a safe. Put it at your aunt's house. Put it at your uncle's house. He'll be jealous. And then you can explain to him, maybe he'll pay you to help him go paperless. So those are a couple of things to consider, but it's your data. Protect it. Don't give it out. Don't fill out forms. Don't fill out surveys unless you have to.
Wow, there's just been so much information here, and there's something that I want to share with you and get your opinion on this. And maybe this could help people at conventions. Tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, okay? So, growing up, my father, my mom's side of the family was all law enforcement, FBI, military, they did everything and they taught me a lot. They taught me a lot about security and personal awareness. My dad grew up on the streets of Brooklyn as an Italian immigrant, so he had a rough time adjusting to America. And some of the things that he taught me, because God bless my grandfather, but he wasn't the kindest guy when my dad was a child. So he would make him and my uncle sleep on the stoop, and you talk about stairwells and dangers and kind of like that in apartment buildings. So my dad, growing up, learned, I guess, what street smarts would be, street intelligence. So he taught me growing up that, if you feel like you're being followed, look for shadows. Like if you're passing by glass windows, if you're in the mall or somewhere, you could look for shadows to see if people are following you, see if they get closer, see if it's consistent. Like he was very turn an aisle. Are they consistent? If you're being followed in a car, divert your traffic pattern, go out your normal way and see if they're still following you. And then other things that he would, and this is something that might go off a little bit, but he was more into defending yourself if you get jumped, because in the
Sure.
streets of New York, they got jumped a lot. Like kids got jumped. So back in his day, he would keep something on him to defend himself, never to attack, always to defend, like defense. Because a lot of times back then the police couldn't get to you right away, or there was a situation. So he would keep like a roll of pennies and he'd keep them in his pocket. And if somebody was going to jump him or a couple kids jump him, he would kind of put it under his knuckles as self-defense. Like, so my dad was always, in a sense, in your book, you talk about awareness beforehand, before you get into the situation. And my dad and my uncle, unfortunately, had to live that life where they always had to think beforehand because they had the experiences and their aftermath of those bad experiences caused trauma. So that trauma caused this thought process of like, how can I protect myself beforehand without being the bad guy? Like, because we don't want to break the law. We want to be the good guys, but how do we defend ourselves from the bad guys? So kind of like in that instance, let me know if my dad's thought process was correct. And maybe this could apply to people going to conventions. How can they think beforehand, security awareness beforehand.
And this goes back to something I mentioned, that security whistle earlier. I never really finished about other things that are options. It depends first off on your state. Not all states are created equal. You may be from Florida or from Texas. Those are two states I've lived in. Those are states that are going to allow you to defend yourself, and stand your ground if you're in a difficult scenario and you have to face something. Not every state is that way. You have to consider also, if something goes difficult and you end up having to defend yourself and you're in front of a jury, that jury is going to be of your peers from that local environment, and they may have a very different worldview than you're used to from where you're from about what is right and wrong and what you are able to do in a self-defense situation. So you need to understand, if you're going to a convention in Vegas, well, then you are under the laws of Nevada. If you're going to a convention in New York City has a very different view about what is acceptable in those scenarios. So you got homework to do in advance. That's my point. I do cover in book 3, part 2, it's called self-defense. And in there, I talk about weapons at hand. I talk about firearms. I talk about suppressors, body armor, a whole bunch of things in there. I don't teach people how to shoot, but I do talk about, if you're going to buy a handgun, some things to consider. Where do you get training? That's really, really important. That's critical, actually. Just because you have a fancy, nice handgun that's current with all the latest bells and whistles doesn't mean you can shoot straight. You may be injuring yourself or somebody else around and make things worse. You gotta have the training. And I talk about where you get real good, solid training from. But weapons at hand, there's things listed in there. A bar of soap in a sock. That is a powerful thing. Anyone who's ever seen the movie Full Metal Jacket will probably remember the scene in there with the bars of soap in the socks. But that's a legit thing. You have to choose, one, what you're capable of doing physically. If you're a 5-foot tall female going up against a 6'7", 350-pound former professional wrestler, you're at a grave disadvantage in a physical confrontation. Glock and Smith & Wesson even that up with appropriate training and having the will to use that tool to your advantage. And this is why you have a Second Amendment. Again, I defer to people to make their own choices, but you got to follow the rules. You got to follow the laws, and that varies. That's the key point. It varies from state to state. You got to do your homework, especially if you're traveling to a conference. But when you're around someplace, what are some other things that are nearby? A heavy book. You grab it with 2 hands and you swing that, you'll put a hurt on somebody. Think phone book back in the day, to use your example, but modern, you got a hardback book that has, thick boards on it. That's an 1.5 inch thick book, man, that can hurt somebody. So that can buy you time to get away. I mentioned about the X earlier. You want to get off the X and run away. That's your best defense. You don't want to engage. You might have to, but you want to run away and run to safety, run where others can help you, make a scene, go someplace where you're going to be safer, where the criminal, the adversary, hasn't prepared the ground, that X. So that's something I covered a little in book 3. You don't have to bring anything with you. You can carry the coins like you mentioned, but the roll of pennies aren't being made anymore.
Yeah,
I don't want
that's
to,
true.
I don't want to tell somebody, hey, do that, because in that environment you're going to, you may get yourself into trouble. But you did say something that your dad and your grandfather, they knew without knowing the concept, they knew about baseline. When you're walking down the street, is it normal for somebody to be walking 5-10 feet behind you and they're still there several minutes later? Probably not. It depends on your environment, but you have to have that baseline. Is that normal or not? If not, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to mitigate risk. I'm going to walk into a grocery store because that person's probably not going to follow me in there. Because if I'm in a grocery store, I'm around a whole bunch of other people, and I'm going to go over and I'm going to go to the potato chip aisle and I'm going to wander around and look at chips. Because then I'm in a place where I probably have phone service. I can call for help. Now, remember, that's always going to take a little while to get there. You can always call for help too and say, hey, I think somebody's following me. I'm in this grocery store. You can go to the service counter and ask for help and say, hey, can I stay here for a few minutes? I feel nervous. I feel that there's I feel like somebody was maybe following me out there a little. People aren't going to want to hang around outside for long because somebody else is going to see them and be like, hey, dude, why are you hanging around in front of the store here? Run along, no loitering. So change the pattern. Go into a store. If you're near a police precinct, walk in and say, weirdest thing in the world, just felt like somebody was following me out there. Can I hang out in here for 10 minutes? Sure, grab a seat. It's going to change what's going on. That's something I would encourage your audience to do. Change. If something is going wrong, change it. Mitigate risk. Choose a place to go to, a hard point where you're going to be safer, and then ask for help if you need it. You don't have to go overboard. If you're unsure, just go in there and hang around. If you go into a shopping mall, leave by a different exit. You came in one exit, walk through the shopping mall. A lot of times they're 2 stories. Go down and leave by a different exit on a different floor. If you see the person again, you got a problem. Pretty certain of it. Chances are high you're going to be heading home.
Amazing, amazing knowledge here, Tim, that you shared with us. And I know that we went over time. I got one last thing I want to share with you, and then hopefully you'll come back on to talk to
Love
me.
to be back on. Yeah.
I love talking to you about all this stuff. So I had a situation, and I think there's other people in this situation. Okay. When my daughter was growing up, we didn't allow her to be on Facebook, Instagram, or anything. It wasn't until she was 18 that she was allowed to be on those platforms.
Yep.
Unfortunately, at the age of 12, her and a couple friends decided they were going to use technology to get on. And my daughter was very smart in early age. She was able to hack the iPhone at like 8 years old. She was very intelligent. So in school one day, she gets on to Snapchat and she's using VPNs to access it through school. She meets some guy online in England who claims to have known her from another class or whatever, and she believes him at 12 years old. Now, I didn't know about all this going on because, as far as we knew, she had
Of
access to
course.
nothing,
Yep.
right? Kids are sneaky sometimes, but she had access to nothing. So it wasn't until she was over her cousin's house where my brother-in-law said, she's on this phone. I don't know where she got it, but she's talking to somebody. And she's shutting the door, taking pictures of herself. And I
Yep.
was like freaking out. I was very worried because we have no idea who this guy was. So my brother-in-law found out more information. The guy claimed to be from England, and he claimed to be a classmate of my daughter's. He got this information by sneaking the phone out while my daughter was sleeping and went on the phone because my daughter didn't lock the phone for whatever reason. So push come to shove, I confronted my daughter at 12 years old, and she said to me that she became afraid of this guy because he started saying, well, I know your parents. I'm going to do something if you don't keep sending me photos. And he was asking for risque photos, and she was 12 years old. So at the time, and maybe this differs from every state, but your advice be greatly appreciated because other families are probably going through similar situations. We went to the local sheriff's office. And at the time, the person we spoke to at the local sheriff's office said to us, well, who gave her the phone? And we said, well, we didn't. And they said, well, whose plan is she on? And it turned out that somehow she was on my brother-in-law's plan or whatever. And they said, okay, well then they would be criminally responsible because she's sending the pictures over his phone line. And I said, wait a minute, what? I said, wait a minute. I said, she's 12 years old. She's a minor. She was tricked into this. She was tricked into this. Oh, well, if you want to press a police report, we're going to investigate you. We're going to investigate them. And and they made it sound very scary. They're like, so if you go this route, this is what we're going to do. So I was very upset as a security conscious individual. I talked to my family, and my family and law enforcement said that's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to go through like FBI possibly or like a cybercrime unit. And for whatever reason, this person at the police station didn't want to handle it that way. I did file an FBI tip later on with the information, And it was like one of those things where we'll take the information, we'll investigate, we may not get back to you, but if there's other cases like this, at least they were aware of it. So I did that. But other families going through similar situations, if they encounter this, what should they do?
One thing I would encourage for anyone listening on your audience, try to get ahead of this first off, because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The old saying. On Open your bills every month. You have a phone bill, even if you get it electronically, which you should. You shouldn't be getting it in the mail hard copy. Don't do that. Get all your bills where they say, hey, your bill's now available on our website. You can log on using your credentials, your strong password, and hopefully an authenticator app or passkeys or however you're choosing to do that. You go on, you look at your bill, and you essentially lock down your bill. So you should know every line on there. You should know every phone. There are people who are trying to do things via phones. They're trying to steal, whether SIM swaps or trying to, get on plan. You got to scrutinize that stuff. So you should say, that is my phone. If it gives you the opportunity to nickname the stuff, say, oh, this is my phone. This is my partner's phone. This is, my daughter's phone, my son's phone, that type of thing. List them out so you know exactly what you got and check it every single month. Sit down and educate your kids again and again and again. They may not hear you the first time, second time, third time. They may hear you the fifth time. Their life circumstances are going to change. A lot of people as humans want to think, oh, I talked to him once. Life is not static. You and I are talking today. There may be a completely different threat that emerges in the next 3 months that we never thought of. I'd say that's probable, not just possible, probable. So you have to continually revisit this stuff. 12-year-old daughter, hey, this is some things that you may be facing. Uncomfortable conversation, but these are things. One, when you talk with people online, assume they're lying to you. They're not who they say they are. You don't have any classmates in England. If you do, come tell me, I will check it out. Have that open line of communication. Say, I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to ground you over this. I want to know because I'm here as your protector. If I'm your dad, I'm trying to protect you. I do think the response you got from the local law enforcement is a little unusual. I was going to say the first thing I would do is to go to local law enforcement. I do think it's great that you went and did an FBI tip. I wouldn't expect to hear anything back, but you are populating, excuse me, essential databases. And that's really important because you don't know if that guy has been doing this to 50 other people. So your tip could be the thing that breaks the case for the Bureau. So that's smart to do. You're doing your piece, but have the conversation in advance. Identify. I actually took a piece of paper one time. I wrote this out to force me mentally to think through it. I took a piece of paper and I took every single data source in my life, in my condo: phone, tablet, computer, smart TV, and a printer, because your printer, it receives data and it has output. I went through and I did all these different things and then identified, how have I locked this down? Oh, it goes through this router. Some of your audience may do what I do. I don't have one router. I have multiple routers because I have different things on different routers and I don't allow them to crosstalk to one another. It's basically silos. So that's me dividing my stuff into pieces. So people are like, well, that's really hard. Depends on what your threat profile is. For some people, it is hard and it's a waste of time. If you have an 80-year-old grandmother who, has limited data exposure, a limited attack surface, she probably doesn't need to have 3 or 4 different routers to divide her Internet of Things one place, her phone another place, all these different things. Some people need that. Some of your audience absolutely needs to have 2 or 3 separate routers, or a router that divides into pieces inside silos. So those are some of the things I would talk about, especially with kids. Talk to them about it again and again and again, and stay up on the technology. For parents, the kids may be smarter than you on some of that stuff. I'm in my late 50s. I think I'm pretty decent on technology. I'll talk with a lot of folks who are young because I've stayed up on it. The reason that people lose the technology bubble from when they're 18 to when they're 45 is because life takes over. They get boring, they get busy, they have work, they have family, their kids become more important, they're focused on that. They can't sit around and read the latest technology magazine and build a computer at home from scratch because they have a job. They don't have time. And that's life that happens. So, can you stay up on it? Sure, there are plenty of people who are 60 who are IT experts. It's just what you choose to spend some of your free time, the limited free time you have. And for your kids, know what they're doing and talk with them. That's my advice.
And you know, thought of another question, and this will be the last one, but also I want to do shout out that you got another book coming out, and it's
10 March.
basically, and what is that one called?
That one is Look Twice. Your Guide When Danger Comes to You at Home and Overseas. These are all long titles. It's the Look Twice book series, but the third one, Your Guide When Danger Comes to You at Home and Overseas. I have 4 parts in that. The first one is about civil unrest and about how to take your loved ones, you and your loved ones, how to go from where civil unrest is occurring, as I call it, moving from A to Z, from where you start to where you need to finish to get them out of harm's way. How do you do that smartly? What are the things you need to consider? I have a basic planning process in there. There's a lot of really good information in that part to keep people safe. What happens if you get cornered? That's part 2, self-defense. Talking about, weapons, the great equalizer, and about knives, about weapons at hand. I cover rifles, handguns, shotguns, NFA weapons, suppressors, short-barreled shotguns and rifles. Some things that are a little more extreme. I give a range of options for people to understand and to learn about and see what fits with their needs. And for some people, firearms aren't the right thing. For some, it is. But you got to be responsible and you got to get the training and you got to follow the laws. And then from there, medical response, a short chapter on medical. And then the final piece, which is pretty robust, overseas travel and living. And I talk in there about the things, those are 2 very different experiences. If you go on a trip overseas, that's one thing. It's a whole different thing if you move as an expat overseas and you're going to live there for a few years. That's a very different experience because then you get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly of wherever you move to. So a whole bunch of stuff on that. March 10th.
March 10th, and I would love to talk to you on that because I got some stories on that. Real quick, I'll just tell you, my brother-in-law did a contract and he used to work for this company that did oh, there goes the webcam technology again. All right, so I'll back up a little bit. So he went overseas to do contract work, and it was a team of 25 people. They went to Mexico, and in Mexico, they had their passports. And one night, the hotel that they were staying at wasn't like a tourist hotel; it was more like a local hotel. And they got all the guys intoxicated somehow, and they woke up without their passports. And a local guy comes in and he says, "Hey, we got all your passports. We want $250 for each passport." And the manager of the crew that was there doing the contract work was like, "Well, can we talk to the local police?" So a local politician comes in and says, "Listen, guys, there's other people that run this town. If you really want your stuff back, you got to pay the 250." And that's something that we could definitely talk about on your next book. But that does happen to Americans going overseas. People do like their passports, do steal their passports, identities, whatever, for whatever reason. So you always got to be careful. And this is the final question I have for you before we're out of here is that I have a friend online that messaged me when he found out I was going to be interviewing you. And he's somebody that is, when it comes to politics, he's agnostic. Like he doesn't care which way or the other. So he just
Security is
wanted
not
to
a political issue. It's a staying safe issue.
So he just wanted a general answer. Like he is very anxious with the way the world's going right now, the way that the world seems to be going. My opinion is that the world has always been like this. It just spreads faster because of social media. We used to have newspapers and it would come out very slow, the information, and people weren't as worried, but it's daily now. All this arguments between countries or whatever, it's all constant because we have a steady stream. It's all repeated too. Like sometimes it could be the same information from last year, just reworded today to get to have an article that you click on. So he's worried about the future and he's worried that there's not enough good people involved to right the ship, I guess, as you say. Like he's worried that something, he's always anxious that something catastrophic is going to happen. But we're humans and we've been through this through civilizations and decades. And what would be your advice to him in a situation like this with his question?
Don't let them win. Don't be anxious because then whoever the adversary is winning. So be calm, enjoy your life, vote. If you're a legal citizen, go vote. Um, I think that a couple things come to my mind on that one. One is social media and the speed of reporting. Used to have, you remember way back in the day, used to have the nightly news. That was it. When they had the Iran hostage crisis in 1979 with the hostages that were taken over in Iran, probably well before a lot of your audience was alive, of course. But they started having this nighttime news thing every single night, this Nightline show. And they did that so people could have another update on what was going on with the hostages that were held for, was it 400 some days, I believe it was. When the embassy was overrun, it was 4 November 1979 when they came over the wall. The students came over the wall in the embassy in Tehran and took the U.S. embassy. And the people in the embassy were held hostage for a long time. And they came on every single night and gave updates because the evening news wasn't enough. Then we went to the 24-hour news cycle. Now there's, little local journalists, people who are, they graduate high school and they're like, I'm going to be a journalist, and they're running all over doing things because technology allows them to do that. All this, I'll say there's a lot of noise out there. Some of it's valid, some of it's not. I believe that the world has had a lot of challenges for an awfully long time. It's just a lot of this stuff is more quickly exposed. Some of it may never been exposed before. Now it's exposed, it's more quickly exposed, and it is exposed around the globe. If I said, hey, what's going on in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan? Most of your audience has no idea where Bishkek is. It's over in Central Asia. They have no idea. But you can find out, and you can have local newspapers from over there translated online through apps. You can read the local news in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. You couldn't do that a few years ago, and most people had no idea. So if there's some atrocity happens over there on the streets, you may hear about it in Los Angeles or Chicago. And that's a huge change. So to answer one, maybe limit the amount of time that you watch the news. Say, I'm going to watch the news 2 times a day. I'm not going to have constant updates. I'm not on call. I'm not from the hostage rescue team at FBI from Quantico. I'm not flying there to be the premier SWAT team of the United States. That's not my job. So I only need to see the news. When I get up in the morning, I'll catch up on some stuff, and maybe I'll take a look sometime later in the afternoon or early evening. And the rest of the day, I'm not going to worry much about it. So control yourself on that. Narrow what your focus is. Choose things that are on the left and the right so you're getting a range of news, because the thing I see is omission. People don't cover stories because it doesn't serve their agenda. So if they're not covering a story and you don't even know it exists, you can't even have any input there. But don't let them win. Seek to control the inflows of information and just go from there.
Very, very great advice. Tim, I want to thank you for coming on, talking to me about the Look Twice series. For everybody out there, please, please go ahead and read this series, buy the books, share it with your friends, family, buy it for them, because there's a lot of great information in here that will protect you for everyday things that you don't think about as an everyday citizen. The information's in there of what to do in a situation, how to prepare a situation, Also, don't let your Uber drivers know that you're going to be gone for weeks at a time. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. Never tell somebody you might get stranded away from home that is not a family member because they might check out your home or have a friend that you don't know might check out your home. So be aware, security conscious, tech aware, everything Tim said, 100%. Tim, thank you so much for coming on. I asked you to.
timbeardauthor.com. You can buy the books through there. That'll take you to Amazon. But thank you. I appreciate coming on today. Thank you very much.